Great. Just wanted to clarify a few things from the first tutorial for consistency. Okay, so multiple choice question 1. A simple idea attributed to Adam Smith is that if it takes twice as long to hunt a deer as a deer should trade for 2 beavers in the marketplace. Considering this, which of the following are valid critiques of the limitations of this model as a determination of price and quantity? Select all that apply. Okay, so to select it has to be valid, and it has to be something about the limitations of this labor model, this labor theory of value sort of model. Okay, so all Adam Smith was saying is that from the point of view of a hunter, or in this market for deers and beavers, this is quantity, this is price. We can think of the price as the number of beavers you get per deer. Okay, because if with only 2 goods, price has to be stated in terms of something. So his idea was that if it takes twice as long to hunt, then a beaver is a deer. It should always be trading for. You should always, if you give up a deer, get 2 beaver. If you give up a beaver, get half a deer. Okay, there's certainly some logic to that. If labor was the only input, if the price of deer was more than twice the price of beaver, then if labor was the only input, perhaps I would only hunt deer. If it takes twice as long, right? If it takes twice as long to hunt deer, if I don't get twice as much per deer as per beaver, I won't hunt it. But that doesn't tell the whole story, because A, hunters who have more beavers than deer would refuse to trade at these prices. No, that doesn't seem like a valid critique. It might be that the price is 2 to 1. It takes me twice as long. I decide to hunt beavers, fine. And then I go to the market and I trade. Why wouldn't I? Maybe if I'm trading for my own consumption, maybe if I start out here, I can trade at 2 to 1, make myself better off. Okay, fine. So that's not a great critique. So A is not correct. B, this does not tell me how many deer and beavers will be traded. Correct. So this tells me, if we believe this, then for any quantity, this will be the price. So no matter how many deer or beavers in the market, the price, the number of beavers you get for a deer is always 2. Okay? Okay, so is this a supply curve? Is it demand curve? It's not really clear, but what it is saying for any quantity there's a certain price, but it doesn't tell me anything about what that quantity should be. So A, incorrect, B, correct. C, in other words, remember, we need, if we imagine this was a supply curve, we might need a demand curve to isolate the quantity, okay? C, the amount of time it takes to hunt a deer versus a beaver may depend on how many have already been caught. Okay, C, that is true. We may have a situation where, as people hunt more and more, it costs more and more to hunt additional beavers or to hunt additional deer. It costs more and more time because we run out of resources. Resources get more expensive, et cetera, et cetera. And in fact, this gets at what Ricardo observed, which was that Ricardo observed that as there seemed to be, population was increasing, there was more demand, it seemed that prices were rising. So in fact, at higher quantities, it might take more and more time. At higher quantities of deer, this is quantities of deer, it might take more and more time to hunt that additional deer. In other words, after we've already hunted half the deers in the woods, it takes more and more time, and holding the constant the time it takes the number of beavers hunted, we might expect the hunters to demand more and more beavers for each deer that they hunt. If now that we're discussing production, we can see this clearly if we think about marginal costs. Okay, so that gives us something like a supply curve, perhaps. Fine. So C is correct. D, there are inputs into the production process other than labor which may affect its price. Certainly. Okay, so in the context of hunting, it might be that it always takes twice as long to hunt a deer as a beaver, but perhaps you can hunt a deer with less ammunition than a beaver, or you don't, even though it takes twice as long, you don't need to, I don't know, you don't need to have as much equipment. Maybe for a beaver, you need lots of traps. Or maybe for a beaver, there's other things you need to do to it to clean it that are more expensive. Okay, so perhaps it takes twice as long to hunt a deer as a beaver, but maybe the total cost, if we include both capital and labor, is maybe closer to comparable. So it shouldn't necessarily cost twice as much. Right, okay. So D is correct. No one would hunt beavers at these prices. What prices? That doesn't make any sense. Okay, so that's the answer to multiple choice question 1, or that's at least my character. The answer is B, C, and D, and that's my explanation. Okay, let me pause the thing and continue.